I've been with my autistic husband for almost 20 years, and in that time I've observed a lot of his behaviors that often don't make it into books or online forums. So today, in this video, I'm going to share with you some of my observations of my autistic husband. I'm going to share some of those behaviors from the perspective of a non-autistic spouse. One common behavior of autism is having very focused interests. So what this means is there's special interests that this autistic person is really passionate about for long periods of time, but sometimes overnight that passion will just die out. So one example that I've seen with Chris is orchards. He's been really into fruit orchards and fruit trees and, going into even understanding the depths of how to graft the trees together and to be able to create new varieties of fruit, or how to save space by getting the trees to bend their arms in different ways. So this was a topic that was really interesting for me because, first of all, we don't live near orchards. We don't live in an area where we could have an orchard. We live in the exact opposite, an extreme urban setting where there's no green space. So the fact that this was his special interest for such a long time was fascinating for me, because what this meant was not only did he learn a lot about it and read a lot about it, but he also talked extensively about it. So even when we were having conversations about completely different things, he would somehow steer the conversation back to this special interest pretty consistently. And if I tried to change the subject, I could sense the frustration with him even before we knew he was autistic. This was something that was very obvious, was that when he had a topic he wanted to learn about, he dove into that topic 250%, where he was just super focused on it, learned a lot about it, asked lots of questions, did his own research, spent all of his free time delving into it, but also sometimes it would change and he would get a new special interest. And that is just something that is very common for autistic people. One thing as a spouse that's non-autistic that was a little bit interesting but sometimes challenging for me was understanding when that special interest shifted. So one day, Chris was not excited about talking about orchards anymore. He still liked orchards, don't get me wrong, but that wasn't what he wanted to talk about all of a sudden. Suddenly, he was interested in talking more about architecture and building design. And so when I started to bring up orchards, because I knew he liked to talk about it before, he was shifting the topic to this new special interest. So as a spouse, this is something that can sometimes be a little bit tricky to keep up with. So you just need to be patient and also just be aware that this is a very normal part of being with somebody who has autism. Getting overstimulated and having a need to reset. So this is something that is very important to know about autistic people, is that overstimulation or getting frustrated to the point of a meltdown or a shutdown is going to lead to needing quiet time and space away from other people. And for me, I used to actually get kind of offended at this. I would think, if Chris was upset, I should be right there with him to be able to make him feel better, to be able to talk through things. But actually, that was coming from the perspective of somebody who's not autistic, which is me. Chris, on the other hand, needed to have complete separation because he just needed time for his brain to reset and to kind of lower his emotional levels at the moment. And every time I would try to push a little bit further to try to talk through it or talk to him before he was ready to do that, he would get more frustrated. And so sometimes a complete meltdown would occur with a lot of frustration. Maybe he would raise his voice or get pretty upset about whatever was the initial cause of it, but actually he was more upset because of my reaction to it, because I kept pushing. And that's something I think that is really hard for a non-autistic spouse to understand and to get used to, is the fact that our needs are different. Like when we get upset, for me, if I'm upset, I might want somebody who's there to talk through it with me, to let me convey my emotions to them. But for someone who's autistic, it could be the complete opposite. And after the time to reset and the time to just have quiet time, the time to not have to talk through anything, that's the time when the person with autism will a lot of times feel better and feel more understood by actually having less contact through that time. So as the spouse of somebody who is autistic, that's something to just keep in mind and to adapt to, and to understand it's not personal. It's actually something that they need, is to reduce the amount of stimulation at that moment and to be able to reset. Something else with being overstimulated is sometimes the setting. So when I am out with Chris, sometimes something will happen or there will be a lot of traffic and a lot of noise and it's really hot and all these things build so that he's getting more and more overstimulated even if I'm not actually seeing it at the time. And we might get to a restaurant, for example, maybe we're going out to eat. And when we arrive at the restaurant, it's noisy, it's crowded, it smells not great, and he's not ready to do it. And he might say, I don't want to eat here, let's go home. And in the past, especially before I realized he had autism, I might push it and say, okay, well, let's go to this other restaurant. There's another restaurant with open seats right next door. Let's try that one instead. But that shift also would cause other newer issues for us. So when this happened, I had to also understand sometimes the need to reset meant actually going home. And why? That was because that's his safe spot, the spot where he needed to be able to go to reset, to get himself ready for other things, and that's very common for autism. But for someone who's non-autistic like myself, I just thought we just needed to change our plans, we needed to be flexible, and that's okay, and let's roll with it. But rolling with things is very challenging for autistics, and that's something that is understandable and that you can adapt to as a spouse. So just understanding that the flow of things and the need to reset and to have a safe spot to do that, understanding all of those components is something that can really help to build your relationship and actually make it a lot better too. Sleep habits. The sleep habits of Chris, and from what I've researched and what I understand for many people who are autistic, are very different from non-autistics. So sleeping is a really challenging thing for a lot of people on the autism spectrum. And there's many, many reasons for this. For Chris, what I've seen is temperature, the texture of the pillows, the pillowcases, the exact type of pillowcases, the types of pillows. So for example, down pillows versus non-down pillows, we've found that there's actually a huge difference in the quality of his sleep based on what the pillow is made of. The blankets, how heavy the blankets are, and definitely the sounds that are happening during sleep. So when all of these things are added up, and then the fact that sometimes he needs to get up at a specific time to be able to do something for the next day, like go to an appointment, all of this leads to a lot of anxiety around sleeping. And from what I understand for autistics, it's also common that the sleep patterns, the circadian rhythm is completely different from non-autistics or from a lot of other people who have what would be considered normal sleeping patterns, like going to bed at a certain time in the evening and waking up at a certain time in the morning. A lot of people with autism or a lot of neurodiverse people are night owls, so they like to stay up really late. Maybe they do their best thinking at nighttime. They're most productive at nighttime. And for Chris, it almost seemed like he was trying to avoid going to sleep because he didn't want to go through the process of not being able to sleep or having all of these other things. So as a non-autistic spouse, I sometimes would get almost a little bit frustrated, like, okay, we agreed that this is the time we were going to try to go to sleep because we know we need to get up at this particular time. Why are we delaying this? But actually, when I started to realize that there were many components to this and many things that were leading to this anxiety around sleep. So being aware of this and being patient and understanding, it was also something that I was able to do in order to better understand it, but also for us to be able to come up with what are good sleep patterns for us. And so another thing that also I've understood is pretty common is sometimes needing some space for sleep too. So needing separate spaces or sometimes needing slight adjustments. So sometimes having a different room to sleep in for both of us, like going to having a second bedroom sometimes is helpful to be able to change things up and see whether that helps sleep too. But I guess we're coming back to the main point of just being patient and being understanding and trying to keep open communication so that you can understand what's really going on. So it might seem like a lot of sleep disruptions, but actually below the surface, it could be things that you could start to figure out and to problem solve if you're able to learn and work together on this. One other point related to sleep is that Chris, because he also has ADHD, but also related to his autism, is he has a very overactive brain. This means that he's always thinking. So sometimes the process of shutting his brain down at night is what's actually really challenging to him. So again, it comes back to just understanding, does this mean that we might need to make a list at nighttime so that he doesn't need to try to remember things through the night for what he needs to do first the next day? Or sometimes having the routine where we're able to talk together about what's coming up tomorrow so that it's not unexpected and so that he knows what's going to happen and doesn't have any anxiety around that. So again, just coming together and understanding what works best for you and your spouse. Another common behavior for autistics is having foods that they really, really love. And in a lot of ways, I equate this to having safe foods, or I guess comfort foods would be what I equate it to. So for me, a comfort food is something when I feel like for example, if I feel homesick, I might really want that particular food. But for Chris, a comfort food is one where he doesn't need to think a lot about it and it's easily on hand and it's something that he can rely on. He knows it won't cause any stomach issues. So that's what he terms as a comfort food. And when he really likes a comfort food or a specific food, he goes back to it constantly. So he actually made a video before about how he ate sweet and sour pork for 30 days straight, and it's true, completely true. But what is also true is that he could have probably continued with that for much longer. That's something that's challenging for me at times because I want to make sure that he's getting the right nutrients and that his diet is balanced. But I've also, with research after he got diagnosed with autism, I've understood that that's also a very complicated subject for many people who are autistic, is foods and also how to balance that with proper nutrition. So we've figured out a lot of ways to be able to manage that, to be able to use other supplements or other kinds of, for example, drinks that he might be able to drink that give him a lot of those nutrients that he might not be getting from his food, especially if he's eating consistently the same foods over and over again. But on the other hand, it's kind of funny, and also one of the things that is interesting about it is he'll really love certain foods for certain periods of time, but then one day he might decide he doesn't want it for a long time. So for me, who helps to purchase a lot of the foods and make sure we have them on hand, that can be challenging to keep up with at times, but it's kind of funny because sometimes that leads to laughs when I see something that he's been eating for months and then all of a sudden it's been sitting in the fridge and it's gone bad because he suddenly decided he didn't want it anymore. So that's just part of the territory. One eating habit that we have had to adapt to a lot is that Chris does not really like eating out at restaurants. And that's something that he's been able, I feel like, to be a lot more honest with since he was diagnosed as autistic, because before he used to believe that I really wanted to go out to restaurants all the time. And that was something I think that a lot of neurotypical couples, they go out to eat at restaurants as like date nights and things like that. So he also, perhaps as part of his masking, felt like that was something he needed to do. But after we were able to have some honest conversations, we realized just that a lot of times some restaurants are worth it, but very rarely are we going to feel that way. So the whole process of going, booking a reservation, going in and it being possibly crowded, too hot, too noisy, the smells bothering us, and maybe the food also causing stomach issues later, we've just come to realize that a lot of times eating out at especially new restaurants can be challenging for us. So we don't do it nearly as often as we used to because that's an adjustment that we've made that helps a lot. So being open to adjustments like this and realizing, for example, for me, I can just go out to eat instead with a friend. If I really want to go to a restaurant, maybe I'll ask one of my friends if they want to go with me instead. And a lot of times they're excited about that. So just adjusting expectations, but also having good communication is always key. Routines. Routines are something that are a little bit challenging for me, especially because of the work that we do sometimes professionally, but routines are so important for people on the autism spectrum, and there's many reasons why, but a lot of it really comes back to allowing their busy brains to be able to focus on other things and to have some predictability so that the world is not too overwhelming and so that all the other situations that arise each day do not compound to a spot where it's too challenging for them and overstimulating. So as the spouse of somebody who's autistic, I find this a little bit challenging at times because Chris, especially because he has ADHD too, he likes a little bit of spontaneity, but his autism really prevents him from doing that too much without later repercussions. So he might feel exhausted after something if it wasn't part of his normal routine, and he might need to just rest for a while after it and get some reset time. Or he might get frustrated because things didn't turn out the way that he expected and his routines got adjusted. So understanding the importance of consistent sleep times, consistent patterns, even when traveling, trying to keep as much consistency as possible. So one of the ways that we do that while we're traveling is to bring our own pillows. And so Chris is able to have consistency with the texture of those pillows and his exact pillowcases that he likes. But understanding that these routines are really important. So if we do something, for example, go to a concert, and it's going to keep us out really late and it's going to throw off our sleep schedule, we really have to discuss and balance and decide whether that exact time to go to a concert or to a show is really going to be worthwhile for us. So again, sometimes we also make adjustments, and Chris is more than happy with this a lot of the times, where I might do things either on my own or with other friends or with family, and he gets to just have some relaxation time at home and sometimes get more time with his special interests or to do things that he would like to do too. And understanding that as part of a neurodiverse relationship is really important too. One of the spots where we have the biggest difference in the way that we define things is with our personal space and our boundaries. So Chris and I have very big differences in terms of how we react when there's a crowd, or even what we feel like a crowd looks like. So for me, a crowd is usually a huge group of people, and I also don't love crowds, so I am fine with avoiding them whenever possible. But for Chris, even having a few people, but in a setting that feels too confined, or he doesn't feel like he has spaces to go, that can feel really crowded to him and overwhelming too. So understanding that, for example, when we are working with our staff or when we're meeting up with friends, understanding what a crowd is and defining that a little bit really has helped us a lot. So for example, for going out to eat, a crowd will already be more than 4 people, will feel crowded because Chris is thinking about who to talk to, how to talk with them, the volume of the conversation, especially in a setting that might be a little bit noisy, like a restaurant. All of these things will be factors too to consider, but it's things that I never would have thought about before being non-autistic. So understanding that about each other is something that's really helped our partnership to improve a lot. And also it's something that's a behavior of autism that I've been able to experience and to witness firsthand. The last thing related to personal space is with boundaries in terms of touching and in terms of being too close in proximity to each other. So sometimes Chris, his moods will change based on the day with how his boundaries are shifting. And some of that will be based on things that have absolutely nothing to do with me. So understanding that as the spouse of somebody who's autistic is really important. A lot of times these things have absolutely nothing to do with things that I've done personally, and it's not because Chris doesn't like me for some reason on that particular day. It's because maybe there's been a lot of things that have really overstimulated him, and he feels like he needs to have less contact because he needs some space and he needs to be able to reset. So all of those things are important to remember, and also to just always remember that many things are not things that should be taken personally as the spouse of someone autistic. So if you are with somebody who's autistic, what are some behaviors that you notice from your partner? Drop some of the thoughts in the comments, and don't forget to like and subscribe to our channel. Sometimes we're actually purchasing extra tickets at a show in order to have buffer seats. Because
I got you a smoothie. There you go.
I don't even think he knew we were filming. But that was really nice. I'm excited for this.